Hey, what's up? Manik here, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys about DEHANCER. The crew at DeHancer has reached out to me and they've sent me a trial of this software so that I could do a bit of a review for you and let you know what I think about it and how I may use it. I think it's interesting because there are a lot of different tools out there for color. There's a lot of ways for people to get from A to B, and DEHANCER is one of those tools that I've known about for quite a while, but I've never actually jumped into. In this case, it's a unique opportunity for them to let me try it out with full features. So I'm going to test this out and let you guys know what I think. To start, I've loaded it in. What I did was I set the base transformation. I have my base conversions in my power grades, and I'm using the ARRI Alexa XT, and I took the signal from ARRI Log C, turned it into DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then have an output with DaVinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709 conversion. That basically sets me up so that I can process my image nicely. Let's see. Okay, so we have this image here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see some aspects of this. This is just some footage around my house. There's a little bit that looks at the sky, a little bit that looks over here at these plants, and I think that that will just give you, a quick look at what these things do, what this plugin does for you. So, all right, let's zoom back out a little bit. All right, we're going to get into the plugin. Go to the effects panel, and what we're going to see here is that you have the selection of your conversion: DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate, 2:70924. That is my essential one. That's the output. The input is the reverse from log C, and then DEHANCER is in the middle. DEHANCER is interesting. It sets you up with quite a few features. I picked a DaVinci Wide Gamut in the middle, and you have the ability to first adjust things like your exposure, right, top to bottom, temperature comp, warm, cool, right, very simple, tint, as usual, very cool, defringe, I don't need any of that, but it's there, and you can adjust the radius on defringing as well, right, so to adjust your edges. All right, then from here you can pick a film stock. There's a lot of options. There's everything from Kodak Gold to Ektar, Portra, things like that. You can drop down. As you see, Ektar, Portra, Kodak Vision 3, Lomachrome. There's a lot of different options. So I'm going to go with the Kodak Vision 3 500T because I use that stock a lot when I'm actually shooting. And then you have a film developer, which is allowing you to adjust things like contrast. Let's see, I'm going to push that a bit. We have gamma correction. We can pull that up just a tad. Color separation. We can either go low or high on the color separation. Right? I think we'll sit it about here. And then a color boost. I tend to not push it too much because it adjusts the actual levels of a lot of other aspects of the image. So I'm not going to push it too far, but it's nice to have. Knowing that it's here is kind of cool. There's a lot of different ways to saturate your images. I tend to work with subtractive saturation, but we can get into that some other time. And film compression. We're going to enable this. And you see in the scopes, the highs are dropping down, right? You can see that predominantly on the wooden fence post in the background, in the center of frame, that is dropping, right? The impact. As you push it, you can see how much of it is clamped, right? You can also set the white point to scale how far the upper level of that will go. And you can adjust the tonal range as well to see what it's affecting. I just like to affect the top, so we don't have to worry about it. And then the color density as well. You can push that to affect the density of the area you're touching. All right, expansion. This is your black point and your white point. Right, so I'm going to push this one a little bit. I tend to work with images where I tend to have like a sharper contrast curve at the bottom, and then I lift my black point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my black point here. I do this a different way, but we're going to use it inside of the tool today just to see how it goes. And your white point as well, you can push that and see. So essentially you have like a bit of a contrast adjustment here as well. That's kind of cool. Let's leave it right there. All right. And you also have normal and luma based. Right. So I'm going to use, let's see, the toggle, right? Strictly luma based and your standard version, right? I'm going to use a standard today. Right, and then your print. Typically, you'd have your stock and you'd print it onto something else to display. Right, we have linear and we have established print stocks available. That is very interesting. Right, so you have your options. You can mess around with that here, but yeah, these are a bit extreme for my taste. But we can also dial that back realistically. So I'm going to leave it as linear. And I'm going to mess with that. I'm going to bring down my exposure a tad. I'm going to mess with the tonal contrast a little bit. Let's push it a little extreme because I'm showing it to you guys and it's going to be compressed, and it's also on my second monitor, so it's quite small. So you have the UI and everything else. But we're going to add the contrast. Let's mess with the color density. Let's push that a little bit. And let's pull some saturation back just a tad. Okay, cool. That's interesting. So we'll disable that and enable it, and you see the jump we got. All right, so we're out of print. Then we go to the color head. This is like a crosstalk, yellow to blue, magenta green, cyan red. It's a little bit like printer lights. You can use those, but there's lots of ways of just adjusting the color between different sections of your image. The yellow and blue cross, right? Sorry, I should enable this first so you can see it. The yellow and blue cross, if you want to push it more yellow, you can. I'm going to do that. You can push it more magenta if you want, a little more green, right? You have different options available to you. And your cyan and red, I'm going to push it cyan a little bit, right? So this is just a test, but to show you, right? There you go, slight adjustments. That's how I'd end up using it anyway. I very regularly do slight adjustments like this. And then you have grain, film grain. This and halation are usually what people go for when they get these plugins. Again, they have tons of options, everything down from Super 8 up to 65 mil in terms of the grain structure. So you can see it's really like getting chunky or narrowing down depending on how far you go, right? What we're going to do is we're going to go to that other spot in the image where you're looking, different image, great image too, but a different image where you're looking at a bit more of the sky. So you can see more of what the film grain is doing, right? So we'll jump back down here and we go to film grain, right? So you can say the amount, like hard grain, you're going to see it in the sky, you're going to see it in everything. You may not need to push it this much realistically, but depending on the story you're telling, you might. But this gives you the option of having some presets. And then if you go to custom, you can actually adjust this yourself. Manually adjust the size of the grain. You can adjust the chroma levels of the grain, like how much color you're getting in it, your highlight, grain density, midtones, right? Shadows, right? You might not do something like this until you're making something really crunchy, but just showing you that it's available. And then you can go from positive to negative, and negative is a whole other dimension of this. This is a very funky look. You're likely not going to use this, but this is just to show you what it's doing, right? You have different levels of grain. The chroma is just going to let you see that. I'm cranking this up just so you can see what's going on, right? So the highlight is affecting your highs, mids, lows, and your shadows, and then you have the film resolution itself, so you can bring it down or up, and that does affect the entire image, which is very fascinating. All right, so we're going to go to a stock version. Yeah, 535 mil. That is pretty standard for what I'm doing. All right, and halation, same thing. We're going to enable it, and you can see not too much actually when it's going this way. But if we go custom, right, you can see, let's see, amplify, right? the hue, the base comp. We're going to go to the background gain and test it. And again, usually it's not going to show up too much. You can see it here at the edges. So the high contrast areas are where you're going to see it the most. And you can crank it up. Very realistically, like I don't use halation too much in what I do. If it naturally occurs, sure, but I typically avoid adding it. There, of course, are some looks that require it. If you're working in color, some projects will require you to push it. And there are a few different ways to do it, but it's nice that it's all included inside of this plugin directly. I'm going to turn it off here. All right, and then we have Bloom. Bloom is an interesting thing as well. Bloom is cool because you can essentially, let's enable it, right? As you see, you're getting a bit of a lift. Some people use filtration in front of their lenses. Some people do it in post. I've started to like doing more stuff in post in terms of things that will degrade the initial image, because I'd love to have a clean slate to work with and then push the image afterward, right? So you can amplify it. You can see it kicking in at the bottom, right? And that is kind of where you start to see it, right? Like here, let's turn up the impact so you can see what's happening, right? There you go, all the way up, all the way down. It's very dreamy, very pushed. Okay. Then we have film damage. If you want to mash up your film, you can mash up your film. I typically don't use anything like that, but if you really need it, you can, and it's here, which is awesome. You can see scratches and things like that popping up. It may be harder to spot, but there's little artifacts and things you're going to see in the film, right? Okay, go and turn that one off. It's a lot of variables in that. All right, film breath, same thing. You know, you're going to see different pushes in your film. Again, very selective. A lot of these things, as you get further on, are more about spatial effects and degrading your image. So the first part is essentially the look itself. Then you have adjustments on contrast curves, saturation, things like that, the aspects of how much these attributes are pushed into your image. And then you get into the other stuff of noise and spatial things where you're dealing with physical properties of the medium being adjusted or shifted around or moved around or worn down to give you a certain look, right? That's available. Another thing is overscan. This stuff is interesting. So if you'd like to work with different gates around your film, like in real film, it's scanned in, and sometimes you can overscan. You can get basically more of the film scanned. That's all it is. And you can see the borders depending on what you want. You have different frames. You have different levels of cleanness or sharpness or roundness. They're all different ways of doing things, and they're useful. They're definitely useful to create certain looks. Music videos use them a lot. A bunch of other things do. So feel free to mess around with that. It's pretty cool. All right. And vignetting. Vignetting is interesting because you can push this quite a bit. I'm going to do an extreme one so you can see what's happening. The size parameter lets you squeeze this in from the outside or dial it back, right? And then you have the aspect ratio. You can change the shape and the actual aspect of this grain. I mean, this vignette, not grain, vignette. So you can see what's going on. You could even dial it in yourself, right? So that is pretty cool. I'm going to reset these because I'm not going to be pushing it. I use vignette in what I do a lot. I typically put this on the outside very subtly, but it's there. I use it that way. Anyway, that's an option. You have it available to you. All right, then we have monitoring. This is another way of you checking false color to see where your levels are sitting, and then your clipping indication, right? So you can find out if something is clipping. I typically shoot in the middle, and I'm shooting on an ARRI, so I tend to leave room so that I'm not blowing any of the windows out. On occasion, I will have to, or maybe have to use the sky and let that go. But realistically, cameras these days are great, so you're very often not going to have to worry too much about it. And that is a thing that happens and that you deal with during image capture. You want to make sure you have enough of the right kind of data so that when you get into post and you're messing around with cool tools like DEHANCER, you can have fun and push the image any way that you want. Then you have your output. You can dial this look in or out as like a global scale, right? So if I want no impact, no change from what I've done, that's essentially what it is. If I want the impact on to show what I've done, this is what it is. And you can dial it back. You can say, you know what, maybe I want 85 to 90%, or I want 75%. That's kind of what I want. You can set it right there and be comfortable. And that is just a toggle, right? A slider, I should say. And then you have a LUT generator where you can take all of that stuff, all of the properties aside from the spatial stuff, the grain and that, and you can export it as a LUT. You have the LUT size, and you can take that and use it in your monitor or use it in your camera and have a great time. You can use it in other projects, and you can replicate that look in a single click instead of worrying about going through all of these parameters again and again. Great way to save out presets. Okay. And then you have your options. You have the fast and the slow versions, higher quality or lower quality, but higher speed. Ultimately, that depends on the system that you're running and what it can handle. It also depends on if you run caching and things like that, but there are lots of ways to optimize. And then you have your standards, your check profiles, your tools, your licensing, and that is standard for any of these bigger plugins. All right, so that is my top to bottom look at DEHANCER. I'm having fun with this. I think there's a lot of different ways that I'm going to be playing with this in the future, just to see what I can do with these different presets. And yeah, I'm always looking for new tools and ways to explore in terms of look development, color grading, and the joy of this is that I can more effectively deliver great looks to the clients that I'm working with. So yeah, that is my review of the DEHANCER Pro. I think it is pretty dang cool. And yeah, I'd say if you want to know more about it, go to the site and give it a try. And if you want my help directly with anything color related, feel free to reach out and I will help you out. If you'd like me to grade one of your projects, you're working on a movie or a music video or something else and you need an assist, hit me up and I'd be happy to help. All right, that is it for today. Manic out. Have a great day. Peace.